All righty, welcome back to another episode of Two Plan Sports. Today, we are discussing some recent visitors, some top sixes that OU's made, some developments as far as crystal balls, just kind of a hodgepodge worth of stuff. There's going to be a lot of information trickling in over the next few days about all the visitors that came in this weekend. There was too many to count and too many to name. It's kind of crazy. Every time you get on Twitter, there's someone else posting a picture when they were there. So between this video, probably Wednesday's video, and maybe even Fridays, we're going to be talking about the visitors and the debriefing of that. We'll see if we can't get in contact with some of them and get some input from them. So today's video, we're going to be talking a little bit about Aaron Flowers. Flowers is coming off a visit to USC. He's announced his commitment date. Anthony Carey, OU got put in their top six. Kaden Massey, Jayden Hardy, Vavoy Tourier, and CJ Jim Coley. So quite a few people to talk about here. So let's jump right into it with Aaron Flowers. We've talked about Aaron Flowers a lot. 2024 four-star safety out of Forney, Texas. At one point, he's a top 10 safety, and at one point, it felt like he was an absolute lock to Oklahoma. And not saying that anything has necessarily changed, but he's coming off of a 3-day visit out at USC, out in LA. Brandon's best friend, Lincoln Riley, was out there, hosted him for a visit. And then after that, he schedules his commitment date of April 7th. So that is just a couple weeks away at this point. There's one crystal ball on 247 in favor of Oklahoma at a confidence level of 6. But it's kind of interesting because you get a little nervous whenever you see that happening, coming off of a visit to another school, and then you schedule your commitment date. But I will say, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe Keon Brown was coming off of a visit from Alabama and then quickly scheduled his commitment date after somewhat recently visiting Oklahoma. And, his last visit was at Alabama, from what I remember. I might be totally misremembering this, but could this be a similar scenario? I'm not sure. Obviously, Oklahoma just landed Jeremiah Newcomb, which we talked about him on an emergency podcast Saturday night. So if you haven't caught that, be sure to go look at that. What do you think about Flowers? I don't know. I mean, it's kind of interesting. In his graphic he posted, there's a lot of schools in the graphic about his commitment.
Yeah, so I was looking up how many times he had been to OU recently, and the most recent one I could find was back in November. Don't remember him being on campus in January. I know we reached out to him, and he spoke highly of Oklahoma, but I think OU has now flipped their focus somewhere else. You mentioned there is a crystal ball. I think it's from Parker Thune from a long time ago at this point, because it did seem like Flowers was going to be part of this 2024 class, but things change. Maybe the staff, their focus changed to other players, or maybe they just both decided, hey, it's time maybe we just got to go our separate ways. Who knows exactly what happened, but it doesn't seem to be going in OU's favor for Flowers at the moment. And the staff is known to make these last second pushes to put some upsets. And Flowers, by the time April 7th comes around, could be part of this class, but it doesn't seem likely at this point. Like you mentioned, he did come off a 3-day visit with USC. He was at Alabama right before. And again, not being on campus these last two bigger weekends for recruiting probably doesn't bode well for OU. We'll see what happens over the next week and a half before his commitment, but I wouldn't expect him to be putting on an Oklahoma hat on that day.
And also, I think Oregon's up there. I think he's also visited Oregon as well. And you kind of wonder that if this isn't something that he might commit elsewhere, but when it really comes time to put his name to paper, put pen to paper, will he really pull the trigger to move across the country? Part of me thinks that this is a post-visit high. We've seen it with Gentry Williams. We've seen it with other recruits where you come off a couple good visits and you're like, I don't need to go to Oklahoma, whatever. And then as those visits move away, time passes, things start to change a little bit. I'm not saying that Flowers, one, isn't going to commit to Oklahoma for the first time, or if he commits elsewhere, that he would eventually decommit. But I think it's going to be hard for Flowers to leave this area because I don't think Oklahoma will back off, even if he commits to USC, Oregon, or whoever.
Yeah, I don't expect OU to back off either, but probably not press him as hard, at least right after his commitment. because they are going after a lot of DBs, both safeties and corners. And they've got, I mean, one of the guys we're going to talk about, my boy Torre, safety, already has an official lined up. So it's not like they don't have enough options. Do they come back to Flowers at some point if things start to go south with other recruits? Maybe, but it really just seems like maybe this is one of the times where that visit policy bit the staff in the butt, because we were talking about it right before recording. Sometimes I understand the intention behind it. You want to make sure that the kids feel 100% comfortable with making the full commitment to Oklahoma, so that they, the staff can kind of laser focus on others, but still in a way they still need to recruit the guys already committed to them until they sign a piece of paper. So could Flowers have been part of the class earlier? I'm not 100% sure, but if there was that possibility, like we have heard with David Stone trying to commit twice, and I know the second time he tried to commit, it was his family, I think, that told him to hold on a little bit. And sometimes you just gotta take the wins when you can get them, especially when it's talented guys at positions of maybe not. Well, defensive line is definitely a need, but DBs, the more you can have of them, the better. Sometimes they just don't turn out. They don't pan. They lose some confidence. I mean, for various reasons, players don't pan out, right? But Flowers seemed to be a lock for a long time until recently, really.
It was definitely it seems like really recently, just off of these recent visits, he went elsewhere. It seemed like he trended that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is what it is. I mean, you never like to see it, but worse things have happened, and Oklahoma's going to be okay at the end of the day. So, it is what it is. I just do wonder that when it comes time to make a decision and commit somewhere, like and sign the paper, Oklahoma isn't the ultimate landing spot. And they might be the commitment date of April 7th as well. So moving on to another guy, I don't think we've ever talked about him, at least when I've been on, is 2024 4-star running back Anthony Carey out of Tampa, Florida, 6 foot, 185-pound kid, top 15, number 14 running back in the class. He recently put out a couple days ago a top 6 of Michigan State, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Oklahoma. So with him, he plays in Florida, great high school football competition. In his career, he played as a freshman, sophomore, and junior, 369 carries, 2,618 yards, and 43 rushing touchdowns. Definitely some solid numbers going into his senior year. Oklahoma, they have no shortage of running backs that are genuinely interested in them, and it's a good spot to be in. And where Oklahoma's truly at with him, I'm not really 100% sure. But when I look at his top 6, Oklahoma is far and away the most elite program. I guess the second one, the only one that could compete, is Notre Dame as far as from a brand standpoint. I mean, Oklahoma is the cream of the crop when it comes to his top 6. So I feel like if Oklahoma wants Anthony Carey, they can have Anthony Carey. Whether they do or not, I'm not sure, because I feel like they're in a really good spot for, if they really wanted Taylor Tatum, they could probably get him. If they really wanted Jeremy Payne, they can get him. There's a lot of options that they could end up getting if they, I don't know if Anthony Carey is Oklahoma's number 1 priority. What do you think?
So I really tried to do a little bit of digging, because I vaguely remember when he released his top 12 and Oklahoma was on it. And as we've talked about multiple times on the show, a top 12, while it is good that they're cutting down their list and they're kind of focusing on schools, it's so far away from it really being meaningful, because you only get 5 official visits. And for the most part, kids now are taking all 5 of those official visits. They're taking advantage of that opportunity they have. So I kind of just assumed Oklahoma, because we've talked about other running backs. We really haven't talked about Anthony. Never really assumed that there was going to be much coming out of it, because I don't think he's even been on campus yet from what I've looked up. On3 doesn't have him being on campus for an unofficial ever. So still kind of throwing me off that OU's there, but clearly there's communication. DeMarco Murray is communicating with him, so recruiting him. Is he a top priority? I guess he feels like he is, so it would seem wrong for me to say he's not, but it's definitely, maybe it's just a timing thing, because the fact that he hasn't been on campus is strange, and how Oklahoma's sticking around. But again, that does show, to your point, that DeMarco Murray is doing everything he can to make sure that there is a great duo or trio of running backs in this recruiting class, and he's not going to be left hanging when it comes National Signing Day. He's going to have his guys part of this roster. If Anthony's going to be one of them, I'm not sure. It just depends on timing, really, because looking at the visit policy, he needs to come unofficially before he can go to OU officially. Is he able to make it before summer, or even at the very, very beginning of summer? That it might just be that it is a long travel. It's not easy to take all these unofficial visits, and Oklahoma seems to be one of the further ones on his list. So maybe it's just the timing. He's probably in other sports where he needs to be in school. He can't be missing weekends. So we'll see, but I wouldn't have like my hopes up for him to be part of the class, because it does look like there's going to be other guys that take those spots first. Could he be a guy that does end up in the class if things go south with some of the other guys? Sure. Because this does, for example, James Peoples, I know that it doesn't seem over, but he did get crystal ball to Ohio State by Parker Thune. So clearly other schools are starting to run away with a couple of our targets, and maybe it just comes down to spots. When are they taken, and can Anthony take that spot early? Because it could just be like a Jackson Arnold thing, right? Jackson Arnold versus Jaden Rashada in last cycle. If Carey comes in unofficially and commits on the spot, and he's got a spot available for him, then maybe just another running back should out of luck.
It might be, and maybe he can get something scheduled for the spring game. That'd probably be a good visit. It should be a really good time for a lot of kids to come up. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, whoever ends up being in this class, you just have to trust DeMarco Murray, because he knows how to recruit a running back and coach a running back. So whether kids are coming and going, and why Oklahoma won't offer or isn't pressing one person or another, it's really, you can't really question them. You just have to say okay and move on.
Especially with running backs. There's so many.
For sure. So staying on the offensive side, I think we've talked about him before, but not a whole lot, is 2024 3-star offensive tackle out of Linden, Kansas, is Kaden Massey, 6'7", 270, according to 247. Huge offensive tackle. He came for an unofficial this weekend. I believe he's got a commitment timeline of around early summer, give or take. Oklahoma's there, Nebraska's there. I'd imagine Kansas and Kansas State are recruiting him as well. I don't really see Kansas or Kansas State really, maybe a Kansas State. I don't really see Kansas, but Nebraska, K-State, and Oklahoma, from outside looking in, seems like to be his top three. I think he took an unofficial to Nebraska recently as well. So it seems like that this is where the competition is going to come in. Now, what this weekend was like, it seemed like it went well. He tweeted out, great weekend in Norman. Could that mean that he's leaning towards Oklahoma? Maybe. But being a kid in Kansas, he's right in K-State territory. He feels like a guy that K-State would scoop up and then make him an all Big 12 player. But Coach B has identified him, made him a priority, obviously, even though he's only a 3-star. At 6'7", 270, pretty impressive. What do you think?
Big dude. He did get crystal ball to Oklahoma. Parker Thune isn't usually wrong. We've said it multiple times. You got to just rely on Parker's ball sometime in these situations. And he would be an impressive guy to have in that offensive line room because of his size. How he's able to keep up and develop under Coach B is a different story, and one that we won't know until he gets on campus, assuming he does become a Sooner. But he is, like you mentioned, a guy that it seems like you would typically see go to Kansas State, sorry. And it feels like, from the fact that Coach B has produced a lot of talent and high talent that gets into the NFL and isn't just in the NFL. They're not just guys that fill roster spots. They're productive guys. If they're not starters, they're backups. in the too deep for NFL teams. So I think that's one reason why a lot of offensive linemen are starting to look at it. And Schmitty, you're starting to see the offensive linemen look like they're offensive linemen. They play aggressive. They have that edge to them again, like we had, with Drew Samia and Powers, and Cody Ford, and Bobby Evans, that group of guys. So I think it's a mixture of those two coaches, along with just the offense is kind of highlighting the offensive talent, the offensive line talent a little bit more, because it is just a lot more reliant on the run. Even though I do think Lincoln Riley's offense was reliant on the run, it just wasn't showing it because there was a lot of pass yards. So, this could be a guy that comes in and starts the offensive line recruiting. We'll see. I know that there's a lot of other offensive linemen that OU's recruiting, but he would be a good start to this offensive line group.
He would. And talking about, Parker Thune putting in crystal balls, obviously he put in one for Massey. About the same time, he put one in for Jayden Hardy, 2024 four-star safety out of Louisville, Texas, number 13 safety overall. He received a crystal ball in favor of Oklahoma with a 7 confidence. His dad, I believe, played at Tennessee, so he's got some ties to the Vols, but it doesn't seem like that's going to play a huge factor here. Again, we were talking about, the safety, Aaron Flowers. Yeah, that wouldn't be great to lose him. You want him. But you already have Jeremiah Newcomb. If you get a Jayden Hardy, and that's just the start. I mean, they're in a great position for a handful of other defensive backs. You're bound to not go 100% here. Jayden Hardy's extremely talented. I wouldn't be surprised, and he even on his Twitter, some of the Twitter accounts that tweet about crystal balls, he retweeted Parker Thune's crystal ball. So obviously there's some sort of interest there, and Jayden Hardy knows that. Last year, he ended up having 42 tackles, 7 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, and a pick, playing at Louisville. And he's been co-MVP and other things like that. So he's highly decorated, highly athletic. Oklahoma seems to be in a great spot. Again, this is between Valai and Brandon Hall. They're recruiting at a high level. And, if you lose out on Aaron Flowers, this is a guy that you feel good about bringing in Jayden Hardy. I mean, I think part of the problem, and we want to get everyone, but at the end of the day, you can only get a handful of guys. And between Hardy and Flowers, you go 1 for 2. I mean, you can't really complain. What do you think?
I agree. He's long, fast, kind of everything you want in a safety. At this point, it seems like it's a matter of when, not if, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later. He's got to, like you mentioned, we as fans want the best talent that fits best with what the coaches want to commit ASAP. Like, I think in a perfect world as fans, we'd have, 10, 15 guys already committed to this class that just have taken visits and have spoken highly of Oklahoma. But this is a longer process than we would all like to be. I'm sure it's a longer process than the coaching staff would like it to be, but the kids at the end of the day have to make the best decision for them. And with that crystal ball coming in at 7 confidence, that's really when it seems like basically if Oklahoma doesn't get his commitment, it's because they fumbled the bag. And the staff hasn't really done that. Have they lost out on some recruitment? Sure, but it really hasn't been because they have let it go for the most part. And we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with Jayden.
And I think he's going to be a part of this next 3 months or so, 3 or 4 months, where Oklahoma's going to go on a tear like they did last year. I think Hardy is going to be one of those guys that will join the fold. So before we keep moving on, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, be sure to leave us a review and spread the word on there as well. So let's continue. Another guy, I don't know if we've ever talked about him. There's a lot of new people that have come on campus over the last few weeks, is 2024 4-star safety, Baboy Tourier out of Irvington, New Jersey. So coming up to the Northeast, 6'1", 185-pound kid. He visited Oklahoma unofficially earlier this month and then recently set up his official to Oklahoma. I believe it's June 16th through 18th. So he's already, a lot of kids talk about, well, I'm going to set one up. Well, he went ahead, made the unofficial, and then scheduled his official already. Again, we're talking about the safety position, the defensive back. Here's another kid, 4-star, safety, long, athletic, can play. I'm telling you, the defensive back positions in this class and playing defensive back at Oklahoma is going to become highly sought after. It's hard for me to really think about that. If you think like 3 or 4 years ago where we've been, with Mike Stoops and everything, and now where we're going, it's hard to really wrap your mind around that. But that's where it's trending right now. And I mean, you're recruiting out of New Jersey. That's like Ohio State country, Penn State country. I mean, that says something. And it's not like he doesn't have any offers. He's offered by Alabama. What do you think?
Dude, I think about this kind of often when we're having, leading up and chatting about what are we going to talk about, who are the players we're going to talk about. And we always bring up at least 1 or 2 corners or DBs when we are discussing who's going to be part of the discussion in the show. Sometimes I think going to the SEC is the reason why we're starting to get so much more attraction from these kids and wanting to be at Oklahoma. But this happened last cycle, and the kids from the 23 class didn't know that they were going to play in the SEC so soon. So it's 100% Brandon Hall and Jay Valai are showing that they're probably the best recruiters on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, Todd Bates is really good. Chavis obviously was able to pull in PJ Adebawore last, find him and then pull him and secure him for the class. But it's hard to ignore what Brandon Hall and Jay Valai are doing. They're not just sticking to the immediate area nearby Oklahoma. They're not just sticking to Texas and Missouri and Arkansas and the southern part of the country. They're going everywhere, and they're going to find talent wherever you are in the U.S. And if they feel like you're going to fit their system, they are going to offer you and show you that you're a priority for them. Torrey is a prime example of that, being so far away, like you mentioned it, Ohio State, Penn State, Big Ten country, really. And he's going in, and this kid already, I believe he's the first guy to actually set up the official visit for Oklahoma. There's a lot of players that intend to visit officially, but he's for sure going. Obviously, that you've got Jeremiah Newcomb that will also be visiting officially, but he's going to be the first uncommitted guy that already has that date lined up. I'm sure we'll start seeing more come in soon, but shows that he has genuine interest in playing at Oklahoma. And that's why when we brought up Aaron Flowers at the beginning, it's not a huge loss. Like, would he have been a great addition to the class? Yeah, he's a very talented player, but there's other very talented players that this staff is targeting, and they're gonna get the personnel they need, numbers wise and talent wise, to make sure that it does become a no-fly zone and on the Palace.
And I would imagine that Jay Valai is his main recruiter. According to 247, I was just taking a quick look, seeing if they noted it for Oklahoma. Yeah, it's Jay Valai. I assumed it was because Jay Valai coached at Rutgers. So Rutgers is in that area. He's got ties to the Northeast. And that's kind of something that this hiring this staff, Jay Valai's got some connections up in the Northeast. I mean, we've got a lot of connections to the Southeast, and then in the mid part of the country. I mean, in the Midwest. I mean, there's ties everywhere. And I think tapping in that Northeast every so often is critical. And Jay Valai provides that connection, considering he's been at Rutgers. So again, 4-star safeties, 4-star defensive backs are going to be rolling in, and there's a lot of depth. And I think also part of that, what Aaron Flowers might be feeling, is there's a lot of young talent already on campus at the defensive back, as at that safety position with Peyton Bowen and, like at Makari Vickers and others. And then you bring in more talent in this 24 class. It might start to look like, do I go elsewhere to get more playing time? At Oklahoma, we always talked about it. It's going to be really easy for a defensive back to get on the field. It's not going to be like that for very much longer. And I think other schools and staffs know that and will use that to recruit against Oklahoma. It used to be like, you can't play at Oklahoma. They play in the Big 12. You're going to get burnt every play. I mean, have you seen how many yards they're giving up? You're never going to go in the league. Now you're going to the Southeastern Conference, and there's so much competition at that spot. You might not see the field because it's so much competition. And I think USC could be using that to say, listen, we got problems. We can't fix them, but we got problems, and maybe you can play.
Yeah,
So,
he can play. I mean, like I said, talented guy, and wherever he ends up going, he will be, I think, a good contributor to their team. But yeah, I think you're hitting it on the head. The competition at the defensive back room, and we typically we talk about the guys like Peyton Bowen and Jacoby Johnson and Makari Vickers because they were recruited in the last cycle. But look at even the transfers from right before. Kanai Walker, a guy that's long, has speed, didn't play much, but is 1 year into his time at Oklahoma, probably going to start contributing soon enough. Robert Spears Jennings, Jaden Rowe. Like there's plenty of guys in that defensive back room that are due to start contributing. And if they don't, then you've got those younger guys to come in and back them up. So that defensive back room is starting to get extremely competitive. And again, just shows how good Jay Valai and Brandon Hall are at their jobs with the recruiting front. And I think we're going to start seeing the developing start coming into play this next season.
yep, definitely. So, in the final guy we're going to talk about is a 2025 kid. And, someone might be able to correct me. I butcher names every so often. CJ Jim Coley, I think that's how you say his name, out of Nashville, Tennessee. He's currently unranked according to 247, but currently holds offers from like Arkansas, Kentucky, Louisville, Maryland. So he's got a handful, plays defensive back, played some wide receiver a little bit in high school, obviously 2025. So, he's coming up on a junior year now. It seemed like the visit went really well. He was there this weekend, part of the Future Freaks event. Seems like he wants to schedule make another trip back to Oklahoma. 6'2" and a half, 6'3", 190 as a sophomore in high school, he could translate into a bigger safety.
That was my thoughts exactly. And he, along with it, because I know that he wasn't the only one there from Lipscomb Academy. If Oklahoma and Matt Wells and the rest of the staff can start creating really good relationships with that high school, they're going to get a lot of very talented players from what should be shoo-ins for Tennessee, with how Tennessee played last year and how they expect to continue to get better under Josh Heupel. They get coached by their previous coach was Trent Dilfer, Super Bowl winning quarterback, and now they have Kevin. I don't know how. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, but future NFL player, and he is I think he's in the Hall of Fame for the. Yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame. If it's for high school or the Tennessee Titans exclusively, I'm not 100% sure, but they're typically getting coached by ex-NFL players. They're getting taught how to play the game of football by the guys that were able to succeed at the highest level of football. So if you can start creating a pipeline to that high school, you're going to eventually start generating or getting some really good, more than likely a little bit more polished players that might be able to play more sooner rather than later.
And it's also SEC country, so you can sell them on the idea, hey, we're going to play Tennessee every so many years. You can play in front of your family and play at Oklahoma. So it's always a good thing. But that's all I've got. Do you have anything else?
And I think we can wrap it up there. I know that we talked about Jeremiah Newcomb last week, our last video. So if you guys just want to end a video challenge, who do you think is going to be the next guy to commit? Is it Hawkins? Do you think that Oklahoma can, I guess, in a way, create an upset situation and find a way to pull in Aaron Flowers? What are your thoughts?
Yep, that's a good idea. I do think Hawkins will be the next one, but made it this far. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps us out a lot. And we'll catch you guys later this week.